Thank you, Susan. That was a wonderful presentation. Of course, everybody will be asking questions, and Ms. Jian will facilitate this. But I want to give them some time. Until then, could you, Susan, please talk about the theological rationale or motivation for writing?
Do you want
The theological motivation for writing research paper. What is the theological motivation for writing a good research paper?
What is the theological motivation? Yes, that's the part I left out. I was assuming that you already sort of were thinking about that. No, it's a great question, right? So words are a gift. I mean, that's the theological motivation, right? God could have spoken to us in many words, in many ways, right? He could have drawn pictures for us or just given us intuitions, but God himself gave us his word, right? And so words are this gift that is built into the human being as an image bearer of God, but particularly those of us who are Christians. Words, I mean, Christ is the word, right? I mean, just sort of everything about words has this rich theological motivation. And so I think, again, this is why it's so important that we not take them casually, and why it's so it's such a sin. It's so evil to use words badly, to use words against people, to use words carelessly. So that there is this motivation that words matter. Words matter to God, words matter to other people, and words then become this gift by which we are able to communicate and to share. There are other ways of sharing as well, but language is one of the primary ways. And so learning how to cultivate good speaking, careful speaking, making sure that our arguments are not false or careless is part of our calling, our vocation as Christians, whether we see ourselves as a scholar or not, because we are using words. And so learning to use words better in God's world. And I could go on, but I better stop at that point. What would you say, Balu, to that? What is our theological motivation? What's your theological motivation?
Yes, thank you for the response, Susan. Well, I'm not prepared to answer my own question, but yes, I think the vocation, Christian vocation, is of different kinds. God calls us with different gifts, and God calls us to reach out different people, groups. And I still think one of the neglected people group is the scholarly community of God. Sometimes we think that they know things and we don't need to cater to them. But our writing also reaches that kind of group. So that's, the vocation of God that is varied, that could be. So, Susan, if you could respond to this question about handling the deficiency of the language. So we are not English-speaking people. For example, I studied Tamil medium, and then I started learning English probably in the college days, particularly the Bible college days. And dealing with the language deficiency puts us into a lot of stress into writing. How do we overcome that?
Yes. And it's a great question. And I just admire you all so much for being multilingual and being able to write in different languages. So there are specific resources for what are called L2 writing, so language 2 writing. And I think Balu might have some of those, or I can send you or through your librarian, some of those resources. But the first thing that I would say is my experience in doing writing workshops with native English speakers and with people in Kenya and people in India is that everyone has trouble writing. So you should not feel as if, someone for whom English is the first language, they can just write easily. They can't. They have very much the same problems that every writer does. So writing is just hard. I just want to say that right up front. I think in terms of the the big scale organizational issues, those can be, I mean, you can think in multiple languages as you're doing that, and as you're doing that kind of research, and the revisioning and the thinking clearly and the thesis, that is sort of, in some senses, language neutral a little bit. And that's such an important part of the revision process. Where I think the stress comes in often for you is at the sentence level, is at that font, at the small level, the small revision level, the sentence level, the gum errors, right? The getting the sentences correct. And that, I think there's a couple of things for that. One is to see if sort of institutionally you can set up writing workshops, writing seminars, writing mentors with people for whom English is a first language, who will do some mentoring one-on-one. And also that as you help one another, that you not think of every sentence as a whole new problem. Usually, if you have someone work through, say, a couple of pages of your writing, there will be certain patterns that you're having trouble with at the sentence level. And if you can have someone help you identify what are those issues. They're often preposition issues in English. It's just terrible. It's a terrible language to learn. So you can begin then to say, okay, well, here's my category of about 20 things that I know I tend to do. And again, don't worry about correcting all the errors while you're writing to think. You will just get more proficient at writing by just doing more of it. And if you're always worried about yourself and editing yourself, you won't write well. So wait until you've done all the big work, and then work with someone who's a little bit more adept in English, or someone who's a native English speaker, to help you with that sort of sentence level. But these bigger issues of revision are really critical for writing well, and they do not rely on your getting every single English sentence correct. So I hope that helps.
Yes.
So be encouraged, just keep writing. And there's a lot you can do for clarity. The other thing I would say is that, deploy your multiple languages. If you've written a research paper in English, then think about how you might translate that into one of your other languages that will reach, again, a different audience. You're using the same research, but now you're thinking of it in a different way. Maybe it's more storytelling, but you can make one piece of writing go a long way in multiple languages.
Thank you so much, Susan. Now, Ms. Jian will read out some questions. Kindly do respond to those questions. Ms. Jian is our faculty member, and she is also the registrar.
Okay, I certainly can't thank you enough, Dr. Susan. Of course, I'm still struggling to find the right words to properly describe how phenomenal your lecture was. And thank you so very much, Dr. Susan, for delivering to us such a remarkable lecture. Indeed, I'm truly humbled by your insightful contributions, and by all accounts, it was one of the greatest lectures I've ever witnessed, and you have definitely enriched all of us today. Okay, and now we'll look forward to some questions. Okay, Dr. Susan, here is your first question. Is it possible to experience writer's block in research writing? If yes, what is the remedy?
Yes, writer's block. Lots of people talk about writer's block. Professional writers say you shouldn't think that way. I think you shouldn't think in terms of writer's block. If you start thinking about it, you'll have it. So writer's block is often because you are being a perfectionist. You want everything you write down to be perfect. No. The best way to get rid of writer's block is to give yourself over to bad writing. To say writing is thinking, whatever I'm thinking, I am thinking things. I'm not blocked by thinking. My brain is not blocked. I'm just going to put something down. It doesn't have to be a full sentence. It doesn't have to be grammatical. The way to stop writer's block is simply to write. When you have writer's block, it's because you're trying to think it beautifully and then put it down beautifully so you don't need to revise. No, 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 no. You do need to revise. Just put down writing and then revise. So again, there are some things, some little tricks to try. One is that as soon as you open your screen or as soon as you pick up a pencil, tell yourself that within the first 30 seconds, you must put a word down. You'll be surprised how if you don't allow yourself to stare, you will start writing. Even if you, and I have done this, I have written several lines of, I don't know what to write. 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 But just typing it out, then something comes. So it's very important to not let yourself say, oh, I've got writer's block, or I've got to read. And it's certainly not, well, because I can't write, I'm going to read something. No, that's really bad. And again, the stopping in the middle. So when you've think, okay, when I start again tomorrow, I'm going to start with this sentence, even write half of the sentence so that as soon as you sit down, you can write the second half of the sentence. You sort of trick yourself into not allowing yourself to stop. But it's hard. I mean, we've all done this. We've all had this, and and procrastinated. But the only way to not have writer's block is to not allow yourself to have writer's block.
Dr. Susan, here is your second question from Mr. Bala. Tell me something about good writing environment, or maybe we can say good time. And also his second question was, is it okay to put our own language, then to translate the idea to English if we are weak in language?
Yes, I think going back and forth between languages is wonderful. So whatever helps you to think well, you might want to think the whole structure, particularly of your paper in another language, and then be translating it. I think that that's fine. And I think the more that you do that, you'll be you'll get facility at doing that. So that is I think that's a good thing to do. And also then you're developing your writing in 2 languages. So that can only be a good thing. I'm not quite sure the first question, what is good writing? But if I'm understanding it correctly, good writing is whatever communicates well with your particular audience. So there's lots of kinds of good writing. This is why audience. Who am I writing for? Is it clear for them? Then that's good writing. There's not kind of an abstract standard for good writing. And as we did a little bit with those complicated sentences that sound like they're really smart, they're not really smart. They're just using a lot of big words. Good writing is writing that communicates well.
Okay, thank you so much. We will have another 2 more questions. Here is a question from Mr. Thuong. Okay, I'll be reading out. Citing a book written a century ago is essential. But Dr. Susan, you have stated that we should refer to those books written 10 years ago. Kindly explain, and if one is not referring to all books, how can a researcher know the historical development of a particular theme or topic?
Yes, very good. Thank you for letting me clarify that. Okay, so primary sources, which can go back hundreds of years, very important. So if you're writing about history, you may have a book that's 100 years old. Classics in your field, those can go back hundreds of years as well. So everybody cites this. This is an important classic book. Primary sources, classic sources, those don't have any kind of time limit. Some reference books. But what I'm talking about with the last 10 years is the scholarship, the secondary scholarship on your topic. So what scholars are currently arguing about or saying, you should try to be in the conversation that is currently going on, not a scholarly conversation from 30 years ago. So in theology, of course, you're going to be citing, people all the way back, maybe Augustine and beyond, right? You're going to be citing many classic works from hundreds of years ago. But people, what you don't want to do is people who were arguing about that, say 30 years ago in journal articles, in secondary books. You don't want to be in their argument. You want to be in whatever conversation is going on within the last 10 years of scholarly argument. So there's this kind of this distinction between the classic works, the works that, of course, you're talking about, historic works from a long time ago, and then this more ephemeral scholarly conversation that does move on. And this is one of the things that I have found. If you're trying to publish articles in international journals, this becomes very, very important. You have to cite scholarship that's recent, or your works will not be published in international journals. So this becomes a question again of audience, right? But you should sort of be trying to train yourself to say, I'm interested in this idea from 100 years ago. What have people in the last 10 years said about it? And maybe they haven't said anything and it's your time to revive it, and that's good too. But what you don't want to do is to get stuck in scholarship that was like 30 years old. Okay, that's the sort of key issue there. So that's a great clarifying question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Here we have another question for you. What is your view on the research ethics in today's situation when we are depending more on online resources? What are things that can be unethical and permissible?
Oh, I mean, so many things can be unethical, right? Not using your sources well, being polemical. So online sources, everybody uses online sources now. Again, work with your librarian. It's very important that you've traced down where it comes from. A lot of online journals are peer reviewed, that is, other people have reviewed them. Making sure that you're very clear, anything that you cite, that you're very clear where it came from. You don't want to just cite a website that makes some kind of a claim if you haven't searched it out yourself to find out where that idea came from. So I do think that with so many online resources now, we have to do more work to kind of trace back where an idea came from. And be very careful before we claim it for ourselves. So many advantages now because we can get a lot more information, so many pitfalls because we can be careless in repeating information that isn't true. So I think we have to be very, very, very careful about that. I also see that there was one question in the chat. I'll just answer it quickly. Is there, when you're a limit of word count, not in paraphrasing. I mean, you can paraphrase quite a lot and you can use a lot of words. If you are actually quoting, if you're using the actual words from someone, if you're using more than 3 of their words in a row, it should have quotes around it. Okay, so that's a really important point. You don't want to have great big long block quotes, several lines long. You want to paraphrase those, but you might want to use like 3 or 4 words that are exactly what they said. Then make sure you put them in quotes, even if it's in the middle of your own paraphrase. So again, this is part of the ethics of giving credit to people about their own words.
Okay, thank you so much. Here we have another question. What is the standard limit for review of literature? How many books make a good literature review?
Audience. It depends, right? Obviously, in a dissertation, right, a long book, a dissertation, you need to pretty much be on top of the conversation, which means you've probably got 200 or 300 books and articles in your bibliography. Now, you haven't read all those carefully. Nobody can. But you've read the beginnings and endings. You know the main argument. You know kind of how to group them. If you were publishing an article in an international academic journal, like a theological journal, you're probably going to have somewhere in the vicinity of 30 to 40 books that you're citing or that you've absorbed. But again, it's not just the number, it's that you have absorbed what the argument is. Okay, so here's this issue, And there's this group of scholars that are saying this, and this group of scholars that are saying this, and this group of scholars that are saying this, and I'm saying this. And so you're not necessarily summarizing everyone in the literature review, but you're kind of clustering them, and you're saying, these are the kinds of arguments that these people, for example, these people are making. But I have I think I've used this example before, but with one of my books, I mean, I had what ended up to be a footnote in the book. Took me literally 9 months of research. Now, I also got a whole article out of that one footnote, but in the book, it ended up just being a single footnote in which I sort of summarized that, this was what was happening in the literature. So this is, again, why audience. You need to know who you're writing for, how much they need to know, but do think, don't just sort of throw out lots and lots of, well, this person says, cluster them. This person says this and I agree. These people say this and I think it's good, but I want to modify it. Agree, disagree, modify, extend. If you think about those ways of responding to your research, it will give you a good way to organize your research and also to respond to it.
I think this can be your last question, Dr. Susan. Tell me something about good writing environment or good time or location. And this question is from Mr. Bala.
Okay, can you repeat that? So about good writing and what?
About good writing environment, good time or good location.
About a good writing environment in terms of your own writing, like your own place where you're writing, your own.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I often call it a good environment. Is a good way of putting it. I often call it like good writing postures, is sort of a word that I've used. So first of all, there is no perfect writing environment. Writing is just hard. You just have to do it. But I do think that it can be important if you're having trouble with writing, or even if you're not, to try to set aside some place that is for writing. So even if it's, even if you have a busy, I'm sitting at actually a big table at the moment that we also eat at. But when I'm writing, there are certain things. I have a stack of books and my computer and a certain chair I sit on. And that sort of tells me when I sit down here, I'm going to write. Some people have even a picture or something that just says, this is not playing with the computer time, this is not reading time, this is writing time. And I do think that that's important. I think another posture of writing that's really important is simply to commit yourself to doing it every day, or if not every day, at least 3 or 4 times a week. And it doesn't, again, it can be bad writing, that doesn't matter. You just have to write. So one of the most important postures about writing is to stop thinking about writing and actually do it. I do think, though, that a space could be helpful. Some people find trying to write at the same time, but lots of us are busy and we have children and there are, there's students. And so what we can't do is say, well, I'm going to wait for the perfect writing environment or the perfect writing time. That will never happen. It's like, I'm going to finish research before I write. It never happens. No one has the perfect time. No one has you. This is a word that I've learned recently from another writing teacher. Rather than saying I have to make time to write, you say, I must secure time to write. I must make it protected. I must make a protected, secure time. I brush my teeth every morning. I eat every day. I can certainly spend 15 minutes writing every day. And you would be surprised how much you can get written in 15 minutes a day. I would just challenge you, if you're not doing that, to do that now, to start, just write 15 minutes a day. Doesn't have to be good writing, but it's something. And then once you've got some things written down, sort of the posture is, if you can get those first words on the page, it is easier to go back then and then begin to shape them and revise them. So I would say, in terms of the environment or the posture, don't look for the perfect environment. If you can, try to have some regular time to write or a regular place to write. Some people write well with music, I don't. Find out what sort of helps you. And also, again, I can't say this too often. A good writing environment is to stop in the middle, to write, and then to know what the next sentence is going to be. Give yourself a little note and stop before you're tired, so that you can come back and be excited to write that next sentence. Thinking it also about it as gift and joy. Yes, it is hard work, but it's not just labor. It's labor that our Lord gives to us. And there is joy in that. And finding the joy in having an idea, saying something about it, crafting a sentence that you really like, taking pleasure in the small parts of writing. I think that that's really important as well. And share with one another, that's again, write in groups, and somebody can say, oh, I tried this, and you go, oh, let me try that. And it may work for you and it may not. But writing groups is also writing environment. That, I think that's the other important thing, to have a group that you write with and that you're accountable to. And maybe whoever wrote the least words or didn't write for the day has to buy everyone else a Coca-Cola or something like that, or buy them a cup of tea, so that you're encouraging one another to write. Never read somebody's writing and go, whatever they've written, there's something there that can be made better. And so to read one another's writing, encourage one another in your writing. It's a gift. Share your gift with the world. But that's a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Susan. Thank you, Ms. Jian, for conducting this question and answer session.